On November 8, 1975, the city of Pretoria, South Africa, became the stage for one of the most unforgettable chapters in bodybuilding history. Mr. Olympia, 1975. For the very first time, the sport's biggest championship crossed oceans and landed on the African continent. That move alone showed the IFBB's ambition to make the event truly international, but it also put the spotlight on a country drowning in political and social controversy. The chosen venue was the Grand Burgers Park Hotel, which that night was transformed into a temple of muscle and aesthetics. Picture the scene, a luxurious hall packed with fans, journalists, and athletes from all over the world. It was a celebration of strength and discipline, but outside those walls, the reality was far harsher. South Africa at the time was still under apartheid, the brutal racial segregation system dividing the country. Ironically, while the nation was banned from events like the Olympics and the World Cup, bodybuilding opened its doors and staged its biggest show right there. The decision brought not just glamour, but plenty of controversy too. To make the contest possible, some unusual exceptions had to be made. Normally, black people weren't allowed into luxury venues like the Burgers Park Hotel, unless they worked there. But this time, black athletes like Serge Nubret and Albert Beckles weren't just allowed to compete. They stayed at the same hotel and shared the same space as everyone else. A detail that might seem small today, but in that context, it symbolized a crack in the wall of segregation. Of course, this choice raised questions. Did the Federation accept South Africa just for money and politics? Or was it a genuine attempt to push for sports integration in a divided world? What's certain is that the 1975 Olympia wasn't remembered only for the physiques on stage. It was also defined by the social tensions echoing far beyond it. Adding even more weight to that weekend, the Mr. Universe contest also took place in Pretoria. For a brief moment, the city felt like the very center of the bodybuilding world. With so many legendary champions gathering in one place, you couldn't help but feel something monumental was about to unfold. And it did. Mr. Olympia in 1975 wasn't just another contest. It became a milestone that shaped the future of the sport and was immortalized on film. What gave this Olympia a unique edge was the fact that it didn't stay confined to the walls of the Burgers Park Hotel. That night, cameras were rolling for a documentary that would forever change how people saw bodybuilding, Pumping Iron. Released in 1977, the film turned what was once a niche sport into a global spectacle, reaching not just hardcore gym rats, but everyday people curious about the world of iron and discipline. At the heart of the story was the rivalry between Arnold Schwarzenegger, the reigning champ, and Ferrigno, the towering challenger. The film turned their showdown into a cinematic drama of heroes and villains, captivating audiences everywhere. Even people who had never heard of Mr. Olympia suddenly knew about it, thanks to the big screen. But how real was that rivalry? Experts often point out that while Lou was huge and impressive, he wasn't yet on Arnold's level when it came to definition, symmetry, and stage presence. Still, Hollywood knows how to tell a story, and the producers milked every shadowy training scene of Ferrigno to sell the idea that he might actually dethrone the Oak. That narrative worked perfectly. The film didn't just cement the rivalry, it catapulted Arnold into superstardom. His confidence in front of the camera, natural charisma, and undeniable victory set him on a fast track to Hollywood. Just a few years later, he was headlining blockbuster movies, opening doors no bodybuilder had ever walked through before. More than just promoting one man, Pumping Iron brought bodybuilding itself into pop culture. For the first time, audiences saw the behind-the-scenes grind, the heavy training, the discipline, the sacrifices, and even the psychological games between competitors. Suddenly, bodybuilding wasn't just about flexing muscles. It was about stories of struggle, strategy, and spectacle. The 1975 Olympia had a simple but intense format. Unlike today's contests with countless categories, back then there were only 2 weight classes, up to 200 pounds, about 200 pounds / 90.7 kilograms, and over 200 pounds. Straightforward, no fluff. It made clear who ruled among the lighter guys and who reigned among the giants. The best part came at the end, the overall pose down. This was when the winner of the lightweights went head-to-head against the heavyweight champ for the ultimate crown. That face-off gave the night a near movie-like atmosphere, 2 worlds colliding. definition and density versus size and sheer mass. That year also set a new standard with the number of athletes. For the first time, 9 competitors stepped on the Olympia stage. That may sound small compared to today, but for that era, it was a lineup of legends, the biggest roster yet, which only boosted the prestige of the competition. That growth also showed just how much momentum bodybuilding was gaining. In 1973, for example, only 3 men had competed at the Olympia. Just 2 years later, almost triple that number were ready to battle it out. Each athlete represented a style, a school, even a different vision of what the ideal physique should look like. The simple format, with just 2 weight classes, had its own advantage. Every victory felt monumental. There were no extra subdivisions to soften the results. Whoever won truly stood out above everyone else. That made claiming a title feel heavier, loaded with prestige. For the fans, it was electrifying. The tension built with every routine until it all exploded in the final showdown. What the audience witnessed wasn't just a series of poses. It was a sports narrative unfolding step by step, climaxing with the announcement of the undisputed champion. In the under 200-pound class, roughly 200 pounds or 90.7 kilograms, the contest was a true spectacle of muscle density and technical skill. It was the category where definition and symmetry often carried more weight than sheer size. And that year, the spotlight was all on Franco Columbu, the Italian with Sardinian roots who made his home in the United States. Short in stature, but massive in strength and presence, Franco arguably brought the best shape of his career to that stage. His thick chest and powerhouse back made him nearly untouchable among the lightweights. Right behind him came a name who won the crowd not just with muscle, but with artistry, Ed Corney. Making his Olympia debut, Corney showed the world that posing could be much more than just a requirement. His body control, his fluidity, and his ability to turn every movement into an almost theatrical performance left the audience in awe. Even Arnold, watching backstage, admitted, "Now that's what I call posing." Third place went to Albert Beckles, a competitor who at the time was just beginning what would become one of the longest careers in pro bodybuilding. Born in Barbados but competing for the UK, Beckles was already showing the peaked biceps that would become his trademark. His physique was consistent, always well-conditioned, qualities that would keep him relevant for decades. In fourth was Frank Zane, who would later go on to become a 3-time Mr. Olympia and one of the greatest symbols of classical aesthetics. But in 1975, Zane wasn't at his sharpest. He lacked the hardness and razor-sharp definition that would make him legendary in the years ahead. Even so, his balanced silhouette already hinted at something special waiting to be polished. Fifth place went to Italy's Giuseppe Diana, who, although he never built a career as long-lasting as his rivals, still carved his name into history on that stage. He represented the European school of bodybuilding, though his presence would remain more of a brief memory for hardcore fans. Another competitor who showed up, but didn't make a huge impact, was Bill Grant. Despite winning big titles like Mr. World, at this Olympia, he was overshadowed and poorly placed. Missing prejudging hurt his overall presentation, and the crowd barely got to see him go toe-to-toe with the others. So, between dense muscle, theatrical posing, and classic lines, the under 200 class proved that greatness wasn't only about size. Franco Columbu dominated the lightweights, but he shared the stage with athletes who would each help shape bodybuilding's future in their own way. If the lightweights impressed with their density and refined aesthetics, the over 200-pound class was the kingdom of the giants. And in 1975, the throne once again belonged to none other than Arnold Schwarzenegger. Even though he came in a bit lighter and softer than in previous years, thanks to filming the movie Stay Hungry, Arnold still showed why he was called the Oak. His massive arms, powerful chest, and carved calves made for a package no one else could beat. In second place shined Serge Nubret, the Frenchman with one of the most aesthetic physiques the sport had ever seen. Nubret stepped on stage with razor-sharp cuts, a sculpted midsection, and symmetry that wowed the crowd. Many fans still argue to this day that Serge was the real highlight of that night, outconditioning even Arnold himself. Still, what he lacked was the commanding stage presence that Schwarzenegger had mastered to perfection. Third place went to Lou Ferrigno, the young giant standing nearly 6 feet 5 inches, about 2 meters tall, and weighing in at 265 pounds, around 120 kilograms of raw muscle mass. Lou was without question the most impressive in terms of sheer size, but his lack of definition cost him. In direct comparison, his enormity wasn't enough to topple the balance and stage presence of his rivals. For Ferrigno, this would be his final Mr. Olympia before stepping fully into show business. Just a few years later, he would become the face of the Incredible Hulk, a role that turned him into a cultural icon. The 1975 Olympia was, in a way, his farewell to the stage in that early part of his career and the start of a completely different path in entertainment. As for Serge Nubret, even with a runner-up finish, he left Pretoria as a legend. His performance cemented him as the very symbol of pure aesthetics in bodybuilding. His lack of screen time in pumping iron sparked endless debate. Why didn't such a stunning athlete get more spotlight in the documentary? Some say he demanded more money. Others claim his calm personality didn't fit the dramatic story the producers wanted to sell. Arnold, on the other hand, made the most of every second he was on stage. Even coming in lighter, his psychological edge and unshakable confidence radiated with each pose. He knew exactly how to capture the judges and the audience's attention, turning the showdown into pure theater. The climax of the night came with the final pose down, where the champions of each weight class faced off for the ultimate Mr. Olympia crown. On one side, the towering Austrian Arnold Schwarzenegger, fresh off his heavyweight win. On the other, the compact yet insanely dense Franco Columbu, who had ruled the lightweights. It was the collision of two completely different physiques, fighting for the Sando. The scene felt straight out of a movie, and in a way, it literally was, as the pumping iron cameras captured every second. Arnold, with his unmistakable arms and chest, squared off against Franco, whose brute strength and jaw-dropping muscle density defied his smaller frame. The audience knew they were watching one of the most electrifying duels in the sport's history. The battle was fierce, pose after pose. Arnold exuded his trademark confidence, using not just his body, but also his charisma to dominate the stage. Franco, in contrast, brought laser focus, flashing deep cuts, a wide back, and a surprising fullness for his size. With every exchange, the crowd roared, unable to guess who would come out on top. When the judges finally gathered to announce the verdict, the tension was off the charts. The result wasn't just close, it was historic. 4 votes for Arnold, 3 for Franco. A razor-thin margin that made it the tightest Olympia final up to that point. For the first time, Arnold's reign had been seriously threatened. But in the end, experience and stage mastery carried the day. Arnold claimed his 6th consecutive Sando, adding another chapter to his legend and leaving Pretoria as the undisputed king of bodybuilding. Still, everyone knew Franco had come dangerously close. Close enough to prove his moment was yet to come. The image of the two side by side, battling for the sport's ultimate title, remains one of bodybuilding's most iconic snapshots. Behind all the stage glamour, though, the 1975 Olympia was also defined by stories the public would only learn later. Many thanks to Pumping Iron, which dramatized the backstage scenes and turned the contest into a true sports soap opera. The biggest storyline was, of course, the supposed rivalry between Arnold Schwarzenegger and Lou Ferrigno, hyped as the epic clash of the night. In the film, Lou was portrayed as the dark challenger, quietly training in a small gym, while Arnold appeared confident, relaxed, and always one step ahead. It was the classic script, the young contender versus the seasoned master. But reality told another story. Lou was still inexperienced on the Olympia stage, while Arnold, after years of dominance, was simply on a different level. The rivalry was more Hollywood than real life. One name that deserves renewed attention is Serge Nubret. Though he placed second in the heavyweight division with a stunning and aesthetic physique, his presence in the film was almost non-existent. Fans still question why such an impactful athlete was practically ignored. Theories range from contract disputes, to a brief suspension Nubret may have faced, to something as simple as him not fitting the drama the filmmakers were after. And then there's one more legendary detail from behind the curtain: Arnold's mind games. Beyond the muscles, Schwarzenegger knew exactly how to use psychology to his advantage. With subtle comments, calculated jokes, and an almost intimidating confidence, he threw his rivals off balance. Lou, especially, often found himself rattled under Arnold's psychological pressure. To some, Arnold's mind games might seem questionable, but for many experts, that was just part of the sport. At the highest level, competition isn't only physical, it's mental too. And in that department, Arnold was just as dominant as he was with his poses. Mr. Olympia 1975 can't be remembered as just another bodybuilding contest. It was also a mirror of a divided world and the social tensions of the time. Choosing South Africa as the host sparked huge controversy, since the country was banned from multiple international competitions due to apartheid, the system of racial segregation that discriminated against and marginalized the black population. Many questioned whether bodybuilding should associate itself with such a controversial place. The IFBB's decision wasn't only about sports, it was also political and financial. Records suggest there were incentives and deals involved in bringing the event to Pretoria, showing that Olympia had already grown big enough to attract interest far beyond the bodybuilding stage. After the final results were announced, the crowd expected the usual champion celebration. But Arnold Schwarzenegger had a surprise in store. Holding the Sando trophy, he grabbed the microphone and officially announced his retirement from bodybuilding. It was the end of an era, 6 straight titles, absolute dominance, and a presence that seemed untouchable at the top of the sport. The announcement shocked many. Arnold was still only 28, young enough to keep racking up victories. But he knew he had already achieved everything possible on that stage. His vision was already reaching further, toward Hollywood and business. It was the perfect time to close one golden chapter and start another. In that instant, the atmosphere inside the Burgers Park Hotel shifted. The crowd, still buzzing from his win, realized they weren't just witnessing another title. They were witnessing a farewell. It was like watching the end of a reign. Arnold stepped away at his peak, leaving behind a legacy almost impossible to match. That decision also cleared the way for other athletes to finally step into the spotlight. Franco Columbu, Arnold's close friend and training partner, would be the first to seize the opportunity, winning Olympia in 1976. In some ways, Arnold's retirement wasn't just a personal choice. It was also a move that reshaped the competitive landscape. Of course, as we all know, the story didn't end there. 5 years later, in 1980, Arnold would make a shocking comeback to the Olympia stage, a return surrounded by controversy. Even though he wasn't in his best shape, he still walked away with the title, sparking debates that still echo to this day. And by the way, we've got a full video on that edition here on the channel. Don't miss it. But in 1975, in that moment, the mood was one of closure. The audience gave him a standing ovation, not just for his physique, but for his charisma and his ability to turn every victory into a spectacle. Arnold wasn't just a champion. He was a showman, someone who understood the power of image and storytelling. His retirement marked the end of bodybuilding's golden chapter, an era where he didn't just win competitions, but transformed the sport into pop culture. Walking off stage, Arnold Schwarzenegger was no longer just the greatest bodybuilder alive. He was already a star on his way to conquering cinema and eventually even politics. Mr. Olympia 1975 wasn't just another date on the IFBB calendar. It went down in history as one of the most iconic and controversial Olympias of all time, remembered not only for what happened on stage, but for what it meant for the future of the sport. It was the edition that firmly cemented Arnold Schwarzenegger as bodybuilding's biggest name, turning him into a living legend. For Franco Columbu, that Olympia was proof he was ready to be champion. Even though he lost the final showdown to Arnold by just 1 vote, his performance was so powerful that it paved the way for his victory the following year. Serge Nubret, meanwhile, though downplayed in the film, left Pretoria celebrated as one of the greatest aesthetic physiques of the decade, a reference point for symmetry and elegance even today. And then there was Ferrigno. Even though he finished only 3rd among the heavyweights, his exposure in pumping iron made him a worldwide celebrity. Shortly after, he became TV's Incredible Hulk, proving Olympia could be more than a stage for athletes. It could also be a springboard to entirely different careers. The impact of pumping iron was massive. The documentary immortalized that contest, carrying bodybuilding beyond gyms and hardcore fans. For the first time, the general public got to see what it really took to build an elite physique: training, discipline, rivalry, and even psychological warfare. Olympia in 1975 stopped being just a sporting event. It became a cultural phenomenon. That legacy also reshaped the way people saw bodybuilding as entertainment. Until then, it was a misunderstood niche. After 1975, it was clear the sport had the power to thrill crowds, generate unforgettable stories, and even rival other forms of spectacle. Olympia was no longer just about muscles. It was about drama, charisma, and narrative. Over the years, other editions would leave their mark, but few ever reached the same symbolic impact. Mr. Olympia 1975 was a true turning point, the moment bodybuilding stopped being just a competition and became global entertainment, with cultural and media reach like never before. So, did you enjoy revisiting this true masterpiece of bodybuilding history? Mr. Olympia 1975 wasn't just a contest. It was a spectacle that forever changed the sport and turned athletes into legends. But now I want to hear from you. In your opinion, who really deserved that overall title, Arnold Schwarzenegger or Franco Columbu? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because your participation is what makes this community so special. If this video brought you value, go ahead and hit that like button. It really helps the channel reach more people who also love the history of bodybuilding. And if you'd like to support even further, consider becoming a channel member. Not only will you help us keep going, but you'll also get access to exclusive content and special perks. And hey, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell. Together, we're building a true timeline of every Olympia, and you definitely won't want to miss the next chapters of this epic journey. Also, share this video with your friends who love training, or who are just curious about the legends of the past. You might inspire someone to dive deeper into this amazing world. And of course, the conversation doesn't stop here. On the end screen, you'll find another video from the channel that I'm sure will grab your attention from start to finish. Click there and keep binge watching with us, because every edition of the Olympia brings secrets, stories, and emotions worth remembering. Thank you for watching all the way through and for being part of this community that celebrates bodybuilding history. You are a key piece of this journey. I'll see you in the next video, and until then, keep pushing for progress, both inside and outside the gym.